Hello students, welcome to the EPG Pathshala. I am Ashok Goyal from the Department of Physics and Astrophysics, University of Delhi. Today we are going to discuss about the module Classification of Integral Equations and the relationship between integral and differential equations, part 1. All this is from the paper Mathematical Physics. So students, let us see what we are going to learn in this module. First and foremost, we will learn to classify the integral equations. Then we will learn the relationship that exists between the differential and integral equations. And finally, we will take up examples in physics. We discuss the classification of integral equations. Now first, they are classified according to whether they are linear and non-linear. As with differential equations, if the unknown function in an integral equation occurs only up to first power, the equation is called a linear equation. Otherwise, the equation is a non-linear equation. For example, the equation phi of x is equal to f of x plus an integral from a to b of a product of the kernel k, which is a function of x and t, multiplied by the unknown square of the unknown function phi square of t dt. So this is an example of a non-linear integral equation, because the unknown function here is phi of x and it occurs as phi square also non-linearly in the integral equation. Therefore, it is non-linear integral equation. Alternatively, the equation phi of x is equal to f of x plus an integral from a to b of some function k of x and t into phi of t dt is a linear differential equation. The non-linear integral equations are mathematically more complicated to solve, and they are most easily solved numerically. So in our discussion, we shall confine ourselves only to linear integral equations. There are two types of integral equations we will consider: Volterra and Fredholm type of equation. If the limits of integration in an integral equation are fixed, then the equation is called a Fredholm equation. Alternatively, if in the limit the variable occurs, that is, the variable occurs in the limit of integration, then such an integral equation is called a Volterra equation. For both types of equation, if the unknown function appears only inside the integral, the equation is called the equation of the first kind. If it appears outside the integral as well, the equations are labeled as the integral equations of the second kind. Having defined the Fredholm and the Volterra equations in the classification of integral equations, we continue the discussion and first take up Fredholm homogeneous equation of the first kind. The Fredholm homogeneous equation of the first kind for the unknown function f of x is the equation g of x is equal to a to b integral a to b dx prime k of x prime comma x f of x prime, where a, b, the function gx and the function k, which is a function of two variables x and x prime or x and y, they are given. The function k is called the kernel, and this is an example of a Fredholm equation of the first kind. A Fredholm equation of the second kind is non-homogeneous, and in this you have a term on the right hand side which is a function of x. Namely, a Fredholm non-homogeneous equation of the second kind looks like gx is equal to f of x plus integral over dx prime from a to b of k, a function of x and x prime, f of x prime. In the same vein, we define Volterra homogeneous and non-homogeneous equations. Volterra homogeneous equation of the first kind is given by g of x is equal to the integral over the limits a to x over dx prime, where the integrand is kx comma x prime of f of x prime. So this is an equation for the unknown function fx with gx, a and the function k, xy given. Notice that the difference between a Fredholm equation and Volterra equation is that a Fredholm equation involves an integral between two definite limits a to b, whereas the Volterra equation involves an integral from a to the variable x. Likewise, a Volterra non-homogeneous equation of the second kind is obtained when you have another function, non-function f of x on the right hand side. Namely, a Volterra non-homogeneous equation of the second kind reads g of x is equal to f of x plus an integral from a to x over dx prime, where the integrand is k, a function of x and x prime, multiplied by f of x prime. As before, the function of two variable k in these equations is called the kernel of the equation. I will now establish relationship between the integral and differential equations. So the integral equations and differential equations are in fact can be related. An integral equation can be converted to a differential equation and a differential equation can be converted into an integral equation. Now, depending on the problem at hand, sometimes it's easy to solve a differential equation and at times it's possible easier to solve the integral equation. So it's important to convert one type of equation into another. The theory of integral and differential equations have a very close connection. To understand the connection, we will first revisit the essentials of the theory of ordinary differential equation. A general ordinary differential equation for the unknown function fx is of the nth order, and a general ordinary differential equation can be written as c naught, a function of x, the nth derivative of f plus c1, a function of f, with the n minus 1 derivatives of x, so on and so forth. The coefficient cn, which is a function of x, multiplied by the function of x, is equal to some other function g of x. This is the most general equation where the function g of x is given, the coefficients c0, c1, c2, cn, etc. are themselves function of x, and it involves the derivatives of the unknown function f with respect to some variable y, and we can have derivatives of all order. Thus, the coefficients cix prime and gx are given, and the nth derivative of f, fn x is defined as the nth derivative of f of x with respect to x. And it is assumed that in the domain I, the given functions, that is the coefficient function cix and the function gs, are all continuous and single value. For the solution to the equation, one needs to specify boundary conditions. There are two types of boundary conditions. The two types of boundary conditions are known as the Cauchy boundary condition and the Dirichlet boundary value problem. The Cauchy boundary conditions means that at a given point x naught, in the interval in which the equation is defined, that is the coefficients, the functions are continuous and single value, one specifies the values of the function and all its derivatives. That is, this Cauchy boundary condition involves the specification of the function and all its derivatives at a single point x naught in the interval in which the equation has to be solved. On the other hand, the Dirichlet boundary conditions are the two-point boundary conditions. In this, in general, n boundary conditions are specified at some points x1, x2 of the interval I. So you have, if the interval I, in the interval I, you have two endpoints x1 and x2. So you specify the boundary conditions which are in general n in number at these points x1, x2. These n conditions may in general be any n linearly independent conditions amongst the functions evaluated at these two boundary endpoints a and b and their derivatives at these endpoints a and b. For example, for n is equal to 2, the boundary conditions would simply be f of a and f of b is equal to 0, for example, or some more complicated like alpha times f of a plus beta times f prime of a is equal to gamma, delta times f of b plus epsilon times f of alpha is equal to phi, where alpha, beta, gamma, sigma, epsilon, etc. are constants. The simplest boundary condition, Dirichlet simple boundary condition for n is equal to 2 is simply obtained by giving the value of the function at these 2 points on the boundary. We will now discuss the general method of solution of the differential equation, but will focus on the relationship of differential equation to integral equations. We start with a few examples, but before we can do this, we have to prove a result for multiple integration, which is called the Cauchy's theorem. What does the Cauchy's theorem say? Cauchy's theorem states that for any integrable function f of x, a n-dimensional integral, for example, f of sigma 1, integrated n times over the variables sigma 1, sigma 2, sigma n minus 1 to sigma n, where the integral, each integral is ranged from a to sigma 1, a to sigma 2, a to sigma n, and finally from a to x. Now the Cauchy's theorem says that this multiple integral of the function f is given by a single integral of f of t multiplied by x minus t to the power n minus 1 integrated over t from a to x divided by 1 upon n minus 1 factorial, where a is some constant point. So what does the Cauchy theorem does? Cauchy theorem relates a n-dimensional integral of a function with specific integration ranges with a single integral over the range a to x. To prove this theorem, we will use the induction method. So what we will do, we will first prove the result for n is equal to 2. When n is equal to 2, the right hand side of the Cauchy's theorem is n is equal to 2, so at 1 factorial is simply 1. So the right hand side is equal to a to integral from a to x of x minus t f of t dt. Now this is the integral of a product of two functions x minus t into f of t. So integrating by parts. So first function x minus t into integral of the second function, which is from a to t f of t prime dt prime between the limits t is equal to a to x, plus integral of differential of the first into integral of the other. So plus integral from a to x, integral of differential of the first function x minus t is simply 1. So integral of the second function is now a to t, integral a to t f t prime dt prime. Now the first term on the right hand side, at both the limits, at the upper limit for example, it vanishes because of x minus t vanishes at t is equal to x. At the lower limit, t is equal to a, it again vanishes because the integral then is from a to a and therefore equal to 0. So the integral a to x minus t ft dt then is equal to simply an integral a to x d sigma 1, now changing the variables, a to sigma 1 f of sigma 2 d sigma 2. The general proof now follows by induction, which means that an integral n-dimensional integral of f of sigma 1 over sigma 1, sigma 2, sigma n minus 1, sigma n, where sigma 1 range is from a to sigma 2 range is a to sigma 3, sigma n minus 1 integral range is from a to sigma n, and sigma n integral range is from a to sigma n plus 2. Now this is given by 1 upon n minus 1 factorial and integral a to sigma n plus 1, that is integral range is from a to sigma n plus 2 of the function sigma n plus 1 minus t to the power n minus 1 ft dt, where we have called x as sigma n plus 1 in the range a to x. Integrating this over the range a to x, the left hand side becomes equal to a n-dimensional integral over sigma 1, sigma 2, sigma n plus 1. Integration ranges of sigma 1 is from a to sigma 2, of sigma 2 is a to sigma 3, as sigma n plus 1 is a to x. And the right hand side is then equal to 1 upon n minus 1 factorial, an integral from a to x over d sigma n plus 1 multiplied by integral from a to sigma n plus 2 of sigma n plus 1 minus t to the power n minus 1 f of t dt. Now the region of integration in the sigma n plus 1 t plane, because this involves an integral in the sigma n plus 1 comma t plane. So the range t varies from a to sigma n plus 1 and sigma n plus 1 varies from a to x. So the region of integration in the sigma n plus 1 t plane is shown in the figure, where along the x-axis we have plotted the variable t and along the y-axis the variable sigma n plus 1. You can see that t varies from a to sigma n plus 1 and sigma n plus 1 varies from a to x. Therefore, the region of integration is given by the dotted triangle OAB as shown in the slide. We interchange the order of integration on the right hand side. That is, we first integrate over sigma n plus 1 and then integrate over dt. So changing the order of integration, the right hand side is 1 upon n minus 1 factorial, an integral from a to x of dt, and multiplied by ft, multiplied by an integral now over sigma n plus 1, where the limits are from t to x, the integrand sigma n plus 1 minus t to the power n minus 1. Now notice this integral on the extreme right can be easily integrated, because this integral over sigma n plus 1 and the integrand is simply sigma n plus 1 minus t to the power n minus 1. So this integral is simply 1 upon n factorial x minus t to the power n. So we are left now, after performing this integral, with a single integral dt, and the right hand side becomes 1 upon n factorial, an integral from a to x over dt, where the integrand is now ft into x minus t to the power n. Now equating the left hand side with the right hand side, we then get the value of this multiple integral of f sigma 1 over sigma 1, sigma 2, sigma n plus 1, where the range of sigma 1 is from a to sigma 2, range of sigma 2 is from a to sigma 3, and range of sigma n plus 1 is from a to x, is then equal to 1 by n factorial integral over t in the integral range from a to x of the integrand f of t x minus t to the power n, which is the equation where n is replaced by n plus 1. Since the theorem was proved for n is equal to 2, the theorem now stands proved for all values of n. And this completes the proof of the Cauchy's theorem. I will now illustrate how a differential equation can be converted to an integral equation. So let us consider a second order general non-homogeneous differential equation given by d2f by dx square plus c1 df by dx plus c0 fx plus gx, where the coefficients c1, c2 and the function g are differentiable functions of x. This equation is to be solved in the interval I, in which the x lies between the two boundary points x1 and x2, which are subject to the Cauchy boundary conditions. Remember that the Cauchy boundary conditions are given at one point of the boundary in the interval. So this equation has to be solved subject to the boundary condition at a single point on the boundary x is equal to a in the interval. And what are the boundary conditions? The boundary condition is that the function f of x at the boundary point x is equal to a is given by some value f naught, and its derivative f prime of x evaluated at the point in the boundary a is equal to f1. So we have the boundary condition which I specified the value of the function and its derivative at a point in the boundary of the interval. Now let's integrate the equation, differential equation, in the interval a to x. So when we integrate this differential equation, the second order term d2f by dx square becomes f prime x, and since this is integrated in the interval from a to x, so we have f prime x minus f prime a plus the second term is to be integrated. Second term is c1 x prime df x prime dx prime integrated over x prime from a to x. Then we have the third term which is integrated from a to x. So the third term reads integral of c naught x prime f of x prime over dx prime from a to x, and the right hand side is simply the integral of gx, which we have written as gx prime over x prime from a to x. We start evaluating. We start by integrating the first integral on the left hand side by parts. So we get f prime x is equal to f1 minus, so this integral which we have over x prime, the integral of df by dx prime into c1 x prime, we integrate this by parts. So the first term is the first function c1 of x prime multiplied by the integral of the other. The integral of df by dx prime is simply f of x prime evaluated at the boundaries a to x plus integral of the differential of the first, which is differential c1 prime, and integral of the other, which is f. So the term becomes, so the first integral term and this f prime x, they give us f prime x is equal to f1 minus c1 x prime fx prime evaluated between the limits a to x plus then integral over x prime of c1 prime, a function of x prime fx double prime integrated over dx prime from a to x. The next term is again we integrate by parts. So we get the next term as into minus a to x dx double prime c naught x double prime fx double prime plus an integral over a to x of gx prime dx prime, which is equal to then f1 minus c1x fx plus c1a f naught plus an integral from a to x, an integral of the product of two functions f of x double prime and c1 prime of x double prime, integrate over x double prime from a to x, minus an integral over the range a to x of the product of again two functions c naught x double prime and f of x double prime, plus an integral in the range a to x of the function g of x double prime integrated over dx double prime. Integrating again from a to x, we get fx minus f0 is equal to f1, a function of x minus a, minus an integral over x prime between in the range a to x of c1 x prime fx prime, plus a double integral over x prime and x double prime, where x prime ranges from a to x and x double prime ranges from a to x prime, of a function c1 prime of x double prime multiplied by f of x double prime, plus c1 function of a into f naught, a function of x minus a, minus again the double integral over x prime and x double prime, with integral ranges for x prime being from a to x prime and for x prime from a to x, and the integrand being c naught x double prime fx double prime, plus again double integration over x prime x double prime of gx prime, where x double prime varies from a to x prime and x prime from a to x. Now, using the result n is equal to 2 for the double integral, which we have from the Cauchy's theorem, we get f of x is equal to f of 0 plus f1 plus c1 of a into f naught, the whole thing multiplied by x minus a, minus the integral from a to x of c1 x prime fx prime over dx prime, minus the integral again of a to x of x minus x prime, now whole x minus x prime multiplied by c naught x prime fx prime minus c1 prime x prime fx prime, plus a double integral over dx prime dx double prime of gx double prime, where the x double prime limits are from a to x prime and x prime limits are a to x. Now, we identify the kernel kxx prime with the expression here, which is x prime minus x into c naught x prime minus c1 x prime minus c1 x prime, and capital F of x as given by the function f naught plus x minus 1, x minus a multiplied by the function f1 plus f naught into c1 of a, plus an integral from a to x over dx prime, where the integrand is gx prime x minus x prime. So, having made this identification fx and x of fx and kx comma x prime in the expression fx which we discussed earlier, differential equation then simply becomes f of x is equal to capital F of x plus an integral a to x of kx comma x prime of f of x prime dx prime. And what is this? So, we have obtained a Volterra integral equation corresponding to the differential equation which we considered. So, differential equation was the second order differential equation, a general differential equation. So, we have converted into a Volterra integral equation, and one point to note is that whereas the differential equation requires for the solution the specification of the boundary conditions, which in that case we consider the Cauchy condition, the corresponding integral equation which we have obtained, which is the Volterra integral equation, have the Cauchy boundary condition built into the integral equation form. So, we don't require any further boundary specification of boundary conditions. Boundary conditions are already built in to this integral equation which corresponds to the differential equation, second order differential equation, which we took as an example for the conversion of the differential equation into the integral equation. We will now illustrate the reverse, that is the conversion of integral equation into differential equation. So earlier we have converted a differential equation into an integral equation. Now sometimes it is profitable to convert a integral equation into a differential equation. Now an integral equation can be converted into a corresponding ordinary differential equation with boundary condition, and for this we use the chain rule of differentiation for a function of several variables. For example, you are all familiar that if you have a function of say 3 variables x1, x2, x3, then the total derivative of this function df by dx, where x1, x2, x3 are functions of x. So df function of x1, x2, x2 dx is equal to, by the chain rule, the partial derivative of f with respect to x1 multiplied by the partial derivative of x1 with respect to x, plus the partial derivative of the function f with respect to the variable f x2 multiplied by the partial derivative of x2 with respect to x, plus likewise the partial derivative of the function f with the third variable x3 multiplied by the partial derivative of x3 with x. Now, if the function is in the form of an integral, then it is straightforward to use this chain rule. For example, if the function of 3 variables x1, x2, x3 is given by the integral of a single function of x3 and t over dt, where the range of integration is x1, x2. Notice that on the right hand side there is a function f with a function of 2 variables x3 and t, and it is to be integrated over t. Now the limits of integration t are x1 to x2. Therefore the resulting function on the right hand side also is a function of x1, x2 and x3. Now, so if we have a function in the form of an integral, then the chain rule would look something like this. That is the total derivative of the function which is in the form of an integral, namely the integral of f xt dt between the limits a which is a function of x, the limits themselves are function of x, and upper limit b which is a function of x. So we apply the chain rule to this function which is given in the form of an integral of a function of x and t over dt between the integral ranges a of x to b of x. Then from the chain rule this can be written as the value of upper range of the integral evaluated at x, that is derivative of that is, see, the range of the integral is from a to x to b of x. A and b are both functions of x. So when we apply the chain rule, then the chain rule will involve partial derivatives of the functions a and b which are the range of integration. So d dx of this becomes b prime of x, that is the derivative of the upper limit b prime of x multiplied by the function of x and t replaced by b of x minus at the lower limit a prime of x and the function of x and t replaced by a of x plus the integral of the partial derivative of f with respect to x over dt, the integral range being ax, simple extension of the chain rule of a function where the function is given in terms of an integral. And this is a useful result which is required for the conversion of an integral equation into a differential equation. I will now illustrate the use of this chain rule by converting an integral equation into a corresponding differential equation. So let us consider for simplicity an equation which is fx is equal to x minus an integral from 0 to x of f of t into t minus x dt. Differentiating this with respect to x. So the derivative of the left hand side dfx of dx is equal to the derivative on the left hand side. You have a function which is simply x, is a function of x, and then the other term is an integral which when integrated over t is a function of x, and therefore we applied the chain rule there. So the ddx of left hand side is equal to the ddx of x, which is 1, minus ddx of this integral. Now in this integral, the upper limit, for example, b of x is equal to x, and the lower limit a of x is equal to 0. Therefore b prime, the derivative of the upper limit with respect to x is simply 1, and derivative of the lower limit is simply equal to 0. So we have bx is equal to x, ax is equal to 0, b prime is equal to 1, and a prime is equal to 0. When we use this in the previous expression for the derivative of an integral, then we get df by dx is equal to 1 minus, within the bracket, 1 into x into 0 minus 0 into minus x into f of 0 plus an integral over minus 1 ft dt from 0 to x, which simply becomes df by dx is equal to 1 plus 0 to x ft dt. Now let us differentiate again with respect to x. So when we differentiate this again with respect to x, we get the second order ordinary differential equation. So on the left hand side we get d2 fx by dx square. On the right hand side, the derivative of 1 gives us 0. The derivative of integral simply gives us the integrand. So d2 fx by dx square is equal to fx is the corresponding differential equation. And what are the boundary conditions? Remember that in the integral equation, the boundary conditions are built in. So in the differential equations, we have to obtain the boundary conditions from the corresponding differential equation which we have converted. So we have converted the integral equation f of x is equal to x minus integral 0 to x of t minus x ft dt into d2f dx square is equal to f of x. Now what about the boundary conditions? The boundary conditions for solving the equation which we have discussed earlier are given by the value of the function and its derivative at some point in the boundary, at one point in the boundary, in fact here. For example, the value of the function at point x equal to 0 is equal to 0, and value of the derivative, first derivative of the function at the point x equal to 0 is equal to 1. Now this is a Volterra equation corresponding to the differential equation discussed above. Note that the initial Cauchy condition for the differential equation is built into the integral equation. That is, when we converted the differential equation with explicitly boundary conditions, the corresponding integral equation that we obtained has the boundary condition built into that. So students, let us summarize what we have learned in this module. We have learned that the integral equations are classified into the Fredholm and Volterra equations. The Fredholm equation is given by g of x is equal to f of x plus an integral from a to b over dx prime of the function k of x and x prime multiplied by the function f of x prime. Here f of x is an unknown function. On the other hand, the Volterra equation is given by an equation of the type g of x is equal to f of x plus an integral from a to x of the kernel k, which is a function of x and x prime, multiplied by the function f of x prime integrated over dx prime. The function of two variables k of x and y in this integral equation is called the kernel of the equation. There are two types of boundary conditions. The Cauchy boundary conditions are specified by giving the value of the function and its derivatives at one point on the boundary. That is, a certain point x is equal to x naught. If we specify the function, its derivative, then this constitutes the Cauchy's boundary condition. The Dirichlet boundary conditions, on the other hand, are specified by the value of the function at the endpoints of the interval. That is, the boundary condition is specified by giving the value of the function at 2 points of the interval, which are the endpoints. Thank you.